Today's session is the Board Member Bootcamp presented by May Maloney. Since 2007, May Maloney has worked with Leadership Greater Hartford in a variety of roles. Currently, she serves as the Senior Program Director for the Leaders on Board program, where she connects individuals to nonprofits in need of a new board member. May is also the Senior Program Director for Quest, a program for high potential emerging leaders from the business and nonprofit sectors. He also conducts frequent workshops regarding leadership development and nonprofit governance. Currently, she serves as a board secretary for First Town Downtown, a nonprofit committed to providing economic enhancement, vibrant recreation, and cultural activity for Windsor residents, and is vice chair for Journey Home, a nonprofit dedicated to eradicating homelessness in Connecticut. She is also serving on the development committee with Connecticut Against Gun Violence Education Fund. Without further ado, we'll get started. Thank you, May.
Thank you so much, Daniel and Lucas, the team at the foundation and the library. Really excited to be with you all today. Appreciate you carving out some time to spend thinking about being a board member, working with a board. It's an important part of the nonprofit world, and really excited to spend the next hour and change with you today. We all probably spend more time in virtual meetings now than we ever thought possible, but just to help ground us, I invite you to turn your camera on if you're in a position to do so. I also understand Zoom fatigue. You might be eating your lunch and prefer having it off. That is fine. We will ask that you keep yourself muted throughout the session just to help minimize any background noise. Do, as it's been said, use the chat to ask any questions. Lucas will help source those for us throughout the presentation so we can respond in real time. Also, if you have any experiences that you want to share with your colleagues on this call, I encourage you to do that as well. There's a lot of wisdom in this Zoom room, and we want to certainly capitalize on that. And just in terms of our process, please feel free to eat your lunch as we go through this, refill your coffee cups. We'll have a formal break about 1 o'clock, but please feel free to get up, move around, stretch as you need to this afternoon. Just to build on what has already been shared, I am with Leadership Greater Hartford. Some of you may be familiar with us. Leadership Greater Hartford is a nonprofit organization where we develop, connect, and inspire diverse leaders to build strong and inclusive communities. We have leadership programming available for people at all stages of their life. We also offer a program called Leaders on Board, where we prepare people to serve on nonprofit boards of directors and then connect them to nonprofits in our community who are looking for new board members. And I was sharing with the team earlier, we are about to place our 1,000th person on a board. We are really excited and know that the need still continues. We have phone calls coming in every week from nonprofits who are looking to bring new folks onto the board. So if that is space that you feel your organization and your board could benefit from, please do feel free to contact me after today. So today we are going to spend some time thinking about nonprofits as a whole, what our sector looks like. We are going to talk a bit about the nonprofit life cycle and where you think your organization may fit. That can help us level set the type of board members that we want to attract, the types of conversations we want to be having in our boardrooms. We'll talk about the 10 basic responsibilities that boards share. We'll spend some time talking about the nuanced differences between the full board and you as an individual board member, and then hopefully be able to answer any questions that you might have. I do know that there's a mixture of folks in this Zoom room, and not everyone is a board member. We may have some staff or other volunteers. I think there might be a poll available. Yes. Thanks, Daniel. So Daniel's going to throw it up. And if you can just quickly complete it, just helpful for us to know the composition of the Zoom room. Thank you.
Oops, I don't know what happened.
Okay. Give it another minute or two.
As we wait for the poll results, we do have a quick question around about leaders on board.
Mhm.
Nick is asking if does Leader on Board have a presence in Bridgeport, or do you know of similar organizations?
That's such a great question. So we've actually been in conversation with the Chamber of Commerce in Bridgeport as they've been interested in creating a similar kind of program. That was before COVID, so I don't know how far things have advanced. But please feel free to reach out to me afterwards. I'd be happy to connect you with the folks that we were talking to in Bridgeport.
And I'll close the poll now.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. Very helpful. So thank you, everybody. Helpful for us to know sort of the mixture and composition of who is in this room. So as I said, we are going to start our conversation with just a sort of a level setting of what we mean when we talk about the word nonprofit. What is a nonprofit? What's important for us to consider as stewards, shepherds, staff members within a nonprofit? I think there are four main components that we want to underscore. Nonprofits, as we know, are formed around a social benefit. There's a need in the community, there's an issue that this organization is seeking to address. The mission guides all that the organization does. There's also no single owner in a nonprofit, which is a very different consideration than a lot of for-profit businesses. There are no owners whatsoever. Nonprofits do not declare shares of stocks when established. It's difficult for some folks to wrap their head around the idea of non-ownership. That's completely understandable. We're programmed to think of business in terms of entrepreneurs, owners, shareholders. A nonprofit is not owned by the people who start it or their successors in leadership. These individuals operate in a position of trust and accountability for the public at large. And the government allows these nonprofit organizations to operate exempt from paying property taxes that other for-profit businesses will pay. So just when we use the word nonprofit, it really means that we're talking, in this case, about 501c3 organizations. These are charitable nonprofit organizations. When I draw your attention to this slide, these numbers are BC, before COVID. So these are 2020 figures, the most recent that I could find. And I draw your attention to the 50c3 public charities. As you can see from this slide, we have about 12,000 nonprofits in our small state of Connecticut, which is amazing when you think about how many different nonprofits operate in our communities. We interact with nonprofits every day, and they really are instrumental in the fabric of our communities. Some nonprofits we know during COVID have closed, others have emerged. Some have had to merge with one another. It will be interesting to see figures as they come out in the next couple of years. I also want to draw your attention to the idea of the nonprofit life cycle. I invite you to think about where your organization fits. The life cycle doesn't ask us to consider the amount of time an organization has been in existence necessarily. That can be one factor, but we want to think about sophistication. We want to think about how robust policies and procedures are for the organization. We want to think about board structure and effectiveness. Is your organization in a startup phase? Are you seeking to grow your programs and your services? Are you looking to expand your board? Oftentimes, startup organizations have boards that are primarily friends and family. These are people that you have a relationship with, invite them to serve on your board because they care about the mission. As the organization grows, oftentimes staff can be hired. Um, Boards will diversify in terms of the type of people, skill sets, background that are brought onto the board. Typically, in these sort of mature spaces, board members serve on active committees. There are additional staff members in place. Perhaps you've noticed that your organization is in a period of stagnation or decline. You've noticed that, some funding sources are not available to you any longer. You may see that you're not as connected to community stakeholders as you once were. Depending on where you are in your life cycle, you're going to want to attract and bring on different kinds of board members or tap into the strengths of existing board members. If you're in a startup position, you may want to encourage folks to serve on your board who have some entrepreneurial skills, people who are excited to innovate and get something off the ground, people who are excited about the creation of an organization. If you're in a period of decline, you may want someone who is really thoughtful around how to find new strategies, how to challenge the process, how to move an organization into a new chapter, a new phase. So following today's session, Daniel is going to send out not only this deck, but also some resources. Among those resources is more information about life cycles. I encourage you to bring that into your boardroom and have a conversation about where you fit, as it can help level set some expectations and help you think about what your board members can be talking about to help you get to that mature space. Any questions so far? Okay. So the nonprofit board, simply put, is a group of volunteers who come together periodically to discuss the health and the vitality of the nonprofit organization. This is a different kind of board volunteer. This is a different kind of volunteer experience than helping Habitat for Humanity, build a home or passing out a bottle of water at the 5K. Those are important ways to contribute. Nonprofits need volunteer support at every level. I always joke that America may run on Dunkin', but nonprofits run on volunteers. We rely heavily on our volunteers. If you are someone who is drawn to the leadership of the organization, somebody who's really thinking about strategy and collaboration and helping shepherd and guide an organization that you care deeply about into the best position possible, you're taking on a leadership role. And sometimes as board members, we can get lost in the minutia of the regular sort of volunteer work, when in reality, not only do we want to be active volunteers and connected to the events and activities of the organization, we need to remember that when we put our board member hat on, we are putting on a leadership hat. It's about collaborative decision making. It's about strategic planning. It's around building your network. It's around making challenging and hard decisions sometimes. It is a privilege to serve on a board. You are taking a seat at an important table. And so we hope that all of our board members in the community feel empowered and equipped to be successful board members. Oftentimes I hear from folks who will say, gosh, I was asked to serve on a board, but I don't really know what that means. Am I supposed to be asking these kinds of questions? I don't really know, where my role ends and where the executive director begins, right? A lot of that is some gray area that hopefully we can talk through some of today. The bulk of this presentation is built on a resource from BoardSource. If you're not already connected to BoardSource, I highly encourage you to get a membership. A lot of resources through BoardSource are free, but if you do purchase a year-long membership, you have access to all of their materials. They have great webinars, they have great templates that you can download. They're fabulous. We're going to spend some time working through BoardSource's 10 basic responsibilities of nonprofit boards. None of these are rocket science, but they do require some nuanced thinking, some understanding, some practice. As we're moving through these, I encourage you to take some stock of what you think your organization, your board, is doing really well. Are there areas that you think you could have some improvement? And please, again, sharing the chat, any experiences that you have had that you would like to share with your colleagues. The first responsibility is to determine the mission and the purpose of the organization. And that sounds so obvious. I can't tell you how often I talk to well-meaning board members who will say things like, oh, we're a nice group of people, we do good stuff, we help kids. Cool. How many other organizations are full of nice people, do good stuff, and help kids, right? What about your organization matters? What about your programs and your services are essential to the community? If your organization was to be wiped off the face of the earth forever, what's the hole that would be left behind? Why do you exist? Is it still relevant? Is your nonprofit's mission still needed by the community? Some of us on this call may remember an organization called Love Makes a Family. Love Makes a Family was a nonprofit based here in Connecticut that was dedicated to marriage equality. They wanted to pass marriage equality in our state. And in 2009, marriage equality was reached. Love Makes a Family closed their doors. There's much more that needs to be done to support LGBTQ plus families, relationship, couples, right? However, Love Makes a Family had a specific mission around marriage equality that was reached. And so they met their mission and the organization closed. Many of us on this call would love to meet our mission to eradicate hunger, homelessness, etc. We may not get there immediately, but it is still relevant to determine if the community needs our organization, if we are still needed. Several years ago, BoardSource, the group I was just talking about, interviewed a number of different executive directors of different size nonprofits. And the question was, what's the most important thing that a board member can bring into the boardroom? What skill are you looking for? What do you want from your board? Off the charts, passion and understanding for mission was top. If you are a passionate, excited board member who understands the nuances of the organization and the needs of the community, and you are attentive and you are showing up and engaged, all of the skills that you have from your professional lives, from your educational background, from your lived experiences will be a benefit to the nonprofit. Some of us on this call are executive directors. An important role of the board is to be selecting that chief executive. You want to be sure that you are hiring and engaging the captain of the ship. Who do you want this person to be? How do you want this person to show up? What skills and attributes are you hoping that they can leverage? Do you want this person to be a strong fundraiser, a strong networker? Do you want this person to have some lived experience? What is it? If you are in a position to be hiring a chief executive, you want to be really, really clear about who you want that person to be, what you want them to do. You need to be planning for succession. Um, as many of us know, Arunan won the election. He is also the executive director of a nonprofit. He is going to be the next mayor of Hartford. Interesting. Their board's going to have to figure out what that means, right? Who is going to take up the mantle? All of us need to be having those kinds of conversations. At Leadership Greater Hartford, our president and CEO of 35 years retired a few years back. And we had to determine, our board had to really think about who the next captain could be. How could we build on a legacy of someone who had served meaningfully for 35 years in today's world? The world has changed. How can we continue to grow in meaningful ways? It's particularly important that you know what you want the chief executive to do, because you're also expected to both support and evaluate that person. I once served on a nonprofit board where our president had been in his role since 1989 and had never received a performance review. It was such a missed opportunity. He didn't really know if the board appreciated his leadership, what we thought he did exceptionally well, what were the areas for growth. I don't think he even knew if the board knew what the heck he was doing, right? So as a board member, it's really important that you take time to provide consistent feedback to your executive director. It's tough. It's hard being an executive director of a nonprofit. What do you appreciate about their gifts? What are you excited about in terms of their leadership? What are the areas that you think are opportunities for growth? Are there ways that you can contribute to that growth? You may have a skill set or a connection to a network that would be particularly important for your executive director to have access to. Ongoing and consistent feedback is important. So is a formal evaluation. You need to evaluate your chief executive on a yearly basis. If that is not something you are currently doing and that's something you want to explore, I encourage you to look at BoardSource. They have great templates that you can use, you can manipulate for your own purposes, and begin to build that into board work. It's important. It's also important that you evaluate yourself as a board member. I joined 2 boards very quickly when I first started with this role, and I was interested in both organizations. I liked the people that I was working alongside. I had a baby during that time, and I sat down to do my evaluations, and what I learned was sort of striking. I hadn't really paid attention to the fact that one of the boards, I was routinely scheduling over meetings. I was not prioritizing attending those events. I was struggling a little bit in how I talked about the organization. I didn't really know the mission statement. The other organization, I felt very comfortable with. I made sure I attended all the meetings. I made sure I didn't miss an event. I was able to articulate the impact and power of the organization more fluently. It wasn't something that I was conscious of until I sat down to do an evaluation. If that is space that you feel like you want to explore, again, I encourage you to look at BoardSource. There's great templates on other websites too, but it's something that I encourage you to think about weaving into the culture of your boards. It can be very, very helpful for folks to take a step back and think, I've committed to this organization. I'm finding I'm struggling in these ways, and then have a conversation. Or, gosh, I'm feeling pretty good about my board service and I want to continue, right? It can be an important way to just take a pause and reflect. Many of you on this call have been involved in strategic planning. When we are in person, I'll often ask folks to raise their hand if they like strategic planning, and very few people typically do. I think often that is because we go through this whole strategic planning process. It can be long, it can be quite involved, and then the strategic plan lives on a shelf until it's time for the next strategic plan. That's not the purpose of a nonprofit strategic plan. The board really needs to be involved with the plan so that you know where the organization is going. We've talked about your CEO being the captain of the ship, but we need to be, as board members, helping to shepherd and guide and steward that ship, that organization. The strategic plan can help us really think about the planning process as we translate the mission into goals and objectives that are used to focus limited energy and resources. Your strategic plan is your guide over time. And this is a chance for you to focus on the overall impact of the organization. You want to bring in progress reports. You want to look at the strategic plan periodically and think about, gosh, we thought we were going to be here. We're not. What has happened? What has changed? I can guarantee that any strategic plan written in 2019 had no mention of the word COVID. And then suddenly in March of 2020, everything changed. We had to figure out how to offer programs virtually. We had to figure out how to fundraise and offer events virtually. The whole world changed. Strategic plans needed to change. Your strategic plan can and should be reviewed, updated, edited, tweaked, and made useful. It's your guide over time. And so having periodic check-ins on your plan can help you determine if you are still heading in the direction that you thought you would. If not, then why? What has changed? You also, as a board member, want to pay attention to your programs and your services as they relate to your mission. We've said that your mission is your Polaris, right? That is your North Star. That is what guides all of your decision making, all of your programs, all of your services. Are your programs effective in helping you achieve that mission? As a board, it is important to know what's the benchmark of success. How will you know if you are hitting the mark? What data do you want to see to determine success? That data point will look different for every organization. You might be looking at attendance, you might be looking at grades, you might be looking at health indicators, combination of a lot of different things. But know what that is. As a board, have those kinds of conversations. I was doing a board retreat with an organization recently, and they were a therapeutic day school. And the board was talking about some financial challenges that they had been having, which we'll talk about in just a moment. The importance of looking at budgets, yes, very important. But this particular board was only looking at the budget and looking to see that a number of there were holes. There were not a lot of students enrolled in this program and the financial impact that this had. And it was curious that nobody asked the question, well, why? Why do we not have high numbers of enrollment right now? Why are we seeing a downturn in registration and in tuition? And when we probed that a little bit more, the board members realized that they didn't know if it was because there wasn't sufficient marketing in this space to let people know that a therapeutic day school was available in their community. They didn't know if it's because students had negative experiences and the word got out. There was no sense of the efficacy of programs. And so on your screen is a dashboard. The dashboard can be helpful for you to develop your own. Think of the dashboard of your car, right? It has quick indicators about, your gas, engine temperature, right? Think about what indicators you want to have for your board. What quick snapshot would help your board understand the health of the vitality, impact of programs. You can create a dashboard that has whatever information would be most helpful for your organization. This is just a sample. Any questions so far? Talking at you. I know I just said that one group was overly focused on the financial health of the organization. It is, however, a very important role of the board. If you are part of an organization that is lucky enough to have an executive director and or any additional development staff, it is still important to remember that the board is ultimately responsible for ensuring that the organization has the resources it needs to meet its mission. There are many ways that a nonprofit organization earns money. There's government grants, there's fee for service, there's individual contributions. Know where the money is coming from. What Caesar funds, Caesar can unfund. I was on the board of an organization where we provided permanent supportive housing for people living with HIV and AIDS. My very first month on the board, came in, sat down, and learned that we lost one federal grant. One grant. It represented 65% of our funding. And very quickly, we learned that 102 people who lived in this community were very much at risk of not having literally a place to live and supportive services. What were we going to do? Our board had not been thinking enough about having some diverse streams of revenue. You want to ensure that with one grant being removed, that there is still vitality within the organization. One way that board members can contribute to that is through personal philanthropy. A lot of boards, most boards, ask board members to contribute. The dollar amount will change based on the organization. Some will say we want $100 for the year. Some will say that can be give or get. So either you write us a check for $100 or you get 10 friends to write a check for $100. Some will say we want to be part of your top 3 charities. Some will say we ask that you give something that is meaningful to you. On this board that I was a part of, where we were supporting folks with HIV and AIDS, we didn't have a single person on that from that community on our board. And what a missed opportunity that was. It was, how can we be experts in a space without having folks with lived experiences and direct knowledge contributing to important conversations? And when we probed and when we dug a little deeper and found out what were some of the barriers for folks coming onto the board, one of the areas that quickly came to the surface was the financial contribution expectation. And so we changed how we asked about that component of board service. We changed it from a stated dollar amount to an ask of anything that is significant to you. That could be $10, that could be $5. Everyone's financial situation is different, but it helped us reach our 100% giving. We want all board members to give not only their time and their talent, but to lead by example and to give their treasure. Having these conversations as a board is a space that I've noticed and heard from board members that can feel a little sticky. You know, I don't know how much to give. I don't know how much they gave. Have these conversations just so we can level set some expectations and really think about the dollar amount that is the most important for you. Are you able to lower the barriers of access to allow folks in who may not have access to wealth? Are you looking to have different perspectives? Are you looking to have a stated dollar amount, right? Every organization is going to come to a different conclusion, but I encourage you to have those conversations as a board. Another way that you can contribute financially is through fundraising. again, when we're in person, I'll ask people, how many people like fundraising? And people like sit on their hands, right? One of the opportunities that I've been excited to sort of explore in my own development as a board member is to reconsider fundraising as relationship building. And there's wonderful workshops that you can participate and attend that will help you sort of reframe fundraising if that's of interest. But I like to think of fundraising as helping people getting excited about the work that I'm excited about too. And so, how do you steward relationships? How do you get people in the door so that they feel inspired and connected and that they are contributors to the work? How do you tend to your donors? How do you say thank you? How do you let people know that their contributions, regardless of size, matters? At Leadership Greater Hartford, what we do is every year our board members get a list of people who've donated, and each person is asked to call, maybe 10 donors and just say thank you. Just say, because of your contribution, we were able to do XYZ. Thank you. You have really helped us carry out our mission. You've helped us reach our goals. I gotta tell you, more often than not, people are so delighted to get a thank you phone call, they make a second contribution. So again, I encourage you to think about fundraising as ways to tend to and steward relationships. It has significant um, consequences. If you look here, this is a sort of a nonprofit revenue pie chart. We're going to just take a moment and look at these private contributions. If you look here at this philanthropic pie, what this shows us is that our network is super important. If you look at the individuals and the bequests, that's about 80%. That's huge. In 2017, Giving Tuesday saw $274 million come to nonprofits in a single day. So what this image on your screen helps us remember is that it is the people that we know, the people we live next to, the people we work alongside, that we can help cultivate their excitement and interest in the organizations that we're a part of. And they too want to become donors. They want to become contributors to a mission that you and they can care about. I encourage you to ask the question, does your organization have a contingency plan? How do you develop a more diverse stream of revenue? As someone who's been a board member when 65% of the budget is slashed, it's scary. There's big, significant consequences. People's lives are literally impacted. And so what is it that we can do as board members to be prepared for when Caesar takes away a grant or priorities change or whatever? This is a quick image that I found that I thought was just interesting when you look at where charitable dollars go. The biggest dollars have been going towards religious and educational institutions, followed by human services. If you scrolled, sort of your eye down, we see that environmental organizations are on sort of the lower end, which I think is interesting. But again, interesting, you get to see where people have some interest in contributing. I'd be curious to know if there's any surprises, if you feel like this is accurate in your own experiences. But let's move along in the interest of time. The seventh responsibility really does build on the one that we just talked about. Not only are you as a board member responsible for ensuring the organization has the financial resources it needs to carry out its mission, you are also responsible for ensuring the organization has conscientious and responsible handlings of that income. How does your organization budget? How does it spend? Are there discrepancies? Are there any red flags? How does your organization track its budget? Is that something that is shared regularly with the board? Is there a finance committee that is kind of doing a deep dive through the financial records? Are there policies and procedures in place that ensure that there is adequate transparency and that there's no, sort of conflicts? Is a 990 being filed? If there's staff in place, staff will file the 990, but the board needs to be sure that is happening. Simple policies and procedures can be put into place that really elevate the sort of sophistication of financial oversight. So, for example, the person to open up the check is not the person who deposits it, right? You want to have two sets of eyes. You want to review this at least quarterly. My background is in social work. I moved away from the numbers as much as I possibly could. Many of you on this call, this is your bread and butter. This is where you have great comfort and skill. That is wonderful. That is a gift. If you are somebody like me and it took some time to get to know how to read a budget, that's okay. Ask questions. There's great resources. There's great knowledge in this broader community. You can turn to colleagues and ask for some support. If something doesn't make sense to you, the gift that you bring as a board member is the question, why? Help me understand. I see some discrepancies. What's going on? What has happened? What's the story here? It can be a very helpful gift that you as a board member bring when you're looking at a budget. I know that many of us are pretty consistently looking for new board members and want to have boards that are reflective of our communities, that are filled with passionate and talented individuals. Ultimately, that is a role of the board. We want our board members to be thinking about who is not at the table, whose voices are not represented, what skills are not here, what lived experiences are not here. There was an arts organization that we worked with a few years ago. Every member of their organization was an artist, which was cool. They had great insight into the world of being a performance artist. It was interesting to spend time with them. They had some gaps. They didn't have anyone who had strong sort of financial acumen. They didn't have anyone who had legal experience. And so there were some gaps, right? There were some blind spots. For each of us, we need to be thinking about what are our blind spots, right? Where do we not have sort of a robust, full board? Effective boards work to build a culture of trust and candor, none of which is possible without a culture of inclusion, which really encourages all board members to bring their perspectives and identities into the boardroom. We encourage us all as board members to think about racial representation on boards. Having a diverse board of diverse racial diversity on boards is essential, as is the highest making decision body of organizational leadership. Boards play a critical role in creating organizations that prioritize, support, and invests in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And as stewards of our nonprofits need to remember that those who comprise our boards are a reflection of our organization's values and our beliefs. Who's not at the table? I was on a board where we fundraised to provide teachers with grant dollars to do innovative projects in their classroom. And I was the only one on the board during COVID who had a school-aged child. Everybody else had kiddos who had graduated through the school. They had great historical knowledge. They knew a lot of people in the community. They were very well connected. But I was the only person who had a 5-year-old who was doing kindergarten on a tablet. And so I certainly could not talk about everyone's experience of having a kindergartner on a tablet, but I was able to talk about my experience, my family's experience. We were able to have conversations with our teacher and the administrative staff and really began to think differently about what a classroom looks like. What does innovation look like in the context of a global pandemic? So if you are struggling to recruit board members, if that is a space that you feel you could benefit, know that Leaders on Board is available to you. This is the program where we help train interested people to serve on boards and then connect them to nonprofits in our community. It's a fun way to get in touch and in front of a bunch of different people with different lived experiences, different backgrounds, different skills who are looking to meaningfully contribute to the work of nonprofits. I also encourage you to think about not only the skills that board members bring, but also lived experiences. I was on a call just a few weeks ago with a woman who has been a stay-at-home mom, and she's raised 3 kids and they're all off at school. And she was like, gosh, I don't think I have anything to contribute. I don't think I would be a good board member. I was like, hold the phone. Like, you have all of the skills that you need. And let's talk about that, right? Like, your lived experience managing 3 kids, getting them off to school, managing a household, all of these different things. Those skills are absolutely applicable to the boardroom. And so I encourage you to think about people and board members holistically, right? Not just their job or education, but really sort of the full package. How can we leverage folks so that their full authentic selves can be brought in? That is where the richness of boards happen. Also, I encourage you to think about your onboarding processes. We are excited when new board members join us, and we want to ensure success. So what is your onboarding process like? Do you have a system in place? We have 3 new board members coming on at Leadership Greater Hartford, and we have a half-day orientation scheduled for these folks. And it's going to include some historical information about LGH. It's going to have information about the current board structure, committee structure, financials, right? What is it that you can do to set your new board members up for success? Similarly, what can you be doing to support the existing board? What skills can they be building? What can you offer to one another so that there is opportunity for collaboration, for relationship building? We ask our board members to give a lot, right? We're asking them to donate their time, their talent, their treasure. I encourage you to think about what is it that we can give to our board members. They're carving out their time, their precious time to be a board member and to grapple with difficult, challenging concepts, questions, decisions. What is it that our board members want from this experience? What is it that we can do to help them achieve that? Right? So it's both sort of helping us find new board members, certainly, but also stewarding and supporting our current board members. So friends, we have 2 more of these responsibilities, and then we're going to take a quick break. So just bear with me for another couple of minutes, and then you'll be able to stretch your legs. The 9th responsibility is around ensuring that the organization has legal and ethical integrity. And we've worked with a few different attorneys through our Leaders on Board program that would come in and talk about this particular concept. And the takeaway for me was always what one of the attorneys would say. She said, you don't have to be the sharpest tool in the shed, but you can't be asleep at the wheel. And it always stuck with me, right? You don't have to be a nonprofit attorney or expert in order to be faithful to this particular responsibility. But you do need to show up and pay attention. You need to abide by rules and laws. Board directors have a fiduciary duty to ensure that the organization is in full compliance with legal obligations. Board members need to behave in a truthful and ethical manner. And it really is about exhibiting due diligence to keep our house in order. We want to be transparent and provide accurate information when asked, but also not sharing confidential information. We want to be transparent. We want to demonstrate to our larger community that we handle our donations appropriately, that we are thoughtful and responsible stewards of this organization. Some of you may have seen your articles of incorporation. This is the official statement that was at the creation of the nonprofit. This can be interesting. It has good, rich historical data for you. When you're recruiting new board members, this is something that you might want to share. More importantly, you need to be well-versed in your bylaws. I served on a board once where there was a guy who would come into board meetings with bylaws in a sealed envelope. He never once opened them, which drove me crazy. Just pretend you read them. Bylaws have great information for you. It has information about the size of the board. What's the maximum? What's the minimum size? How many people need to be there for a vote to take place? Can votes happen virtually, et cetera, et cetera? The bylaws are useful only if they are used. Right. And so as you're thinking about perhaps bringing on new board members or just looking to strengthen the deliberations in your board meetings, bring out your bylaws. It'll have rich information for you, which can be really helpful. We encourage boards to also have codes of conduct. This is the guidelines for making ethical choices and ensuring accountability for those choices. Ultimately, it expresses commitment to ethical behavior. This should be signed on a yearly basis. Also, conflict of interest policy. Does your organization have a conflict of interest policy? If not, strongly encourage you to adopt one. The conflict of interest policy is important because it prevents board members from benefiting in any way from board service. The policy would require that those of us with a conflict or think we may have a conflict disclose it. It prohibits the interested party, the interested board member, from voting on any matter where there is a conflict. Conflict of interest crops up all the time in nonprofits. There was one group that we were working with years ago where the executive director was married to the board chair. That's a conflict, right? How can you evaluate your spouse, right? How can you determine compensation for your spouse? Right? It's a challenge. How would you handle that, right? The spouse needed to recuse themselves from all of those deliberations that needed to be reported in the minutes. Conflict of interest crops up, but know that there is ways to handle it. And ensure that a policy is in place that is routinely visited, signed, and updated by existing board members. Important. The last responsibility is my favorite, and this is about the board being the walking logo for the organization. When you are out in the community, how can you celebrate the good work this organization is doing? Who in your network would benefit from knowing more about this institution? How can you help other people feel as inspired as you do about the important work that is being done? Being on a board is truly a privilege. It is a space for you to make important contributions, engage in challenging sometimes decisions, to really think about how to advance an organization that you care so deeply about. You are a board member. Who else can feel that same excitement? If you find that your organization is in a period of some difficulty, how do you as a board respond? There was a group we worked with a few years ago who they were an environmental protection agency. And they had developed the reputation of being tree huggers. And that really devalued the important work that they were doing. They were protecting vulnerable green spaces and animals. And so the board needed to think about how to reposition, how to talk about this organization differently so it could effectively demonstrate the value that they brought to the community. So I leave you with this. Serving on a board, again, is a privilege. It's an exciting opportunity. It is also a significant responsibility, and one that we hope you will feel inspired and motivated to continue. For those of us on this call who are staff members, for those who are executive directors, we know how important board members are as they carve out time to think with us about our work, about the organization. Board members are essential. We need board members today, arguably more than ever before. So to the board members who are on this call, thank you for being here, for carving out the time, and for your significant contributions. I've been talking at you for a while, so let's pause here. We'll take about a 5-minute break. Every clock I have is different, but it looks like we can come back at about 1:03 to be exact. And then we'll get through the rest of the presentation and leave some time for question and answers. And jump back in. Thank you. Yeah, so we'll jump back in. I only have a couple of slides left, and then wanted to give some time if anyone had questions for me or for one another. There's a lot of folks in this room who are veteran board members. We have executive directors and staff. So we'll have some time at the end just to have some conversations. If there's nothing burning or pressing and you want some time back to your day, you're welcome to hop off as well. But just did want to make some conversation time available. So up until this point, we have spent the bulk of this time together talking about the full board, the group of volunteers. It is the full board, it is the group of volunteers that have the legal authority to make decisions on behalf of the organization. Individual board members do not. It is through the collective, it is through the full group that decisions are made, that votes can be passed. So that's an important consideration. We're going to pivot slightly and spend just a couple of minutes talking about you as the individual board member, and some of the nuanced differences and similarities to the full board responsibilities that we've spent some time thinking through. So these are often referred to as the 3 duties, sometimes the 3 Ds. You may be familiar with these. This is the duty of care, the duty of loyalty, and the duty of obedience. The duty of care reminds us that we need to think through our decisions thoughtfully. We need to pay attention, show up, engage, be aware of what is going on. We don't want to be the board member who has never shown up to board meetings. We want to be active participants. We want to think about, based on the information that we have available to us, what is the best way to move forward? How would other prudent, thoughtful people decide to move forward based on this information? None of us are mind readers. We may make mistakes. We might look back and be like, oh gosh, I was the wrong choice. But we all need to be thinking about the duty of care in terms of how we can best engage with the materials in front of us, the decisions that we have to make, in a way that is thoughtful, in a way that demonstrates responsibility and care. If your organization gets a grant for $10,000 and you're like, I am on a winning streak at Mohegan Sun, I just know that I can double this, right? That is in violation of the duty of care, right? That would be not the way an ordinary, prudent person would respond. The duty of loyalty, again, reminds us that we need to put the organization's interests ahead of our own personal or professional interests. there was a story that I read a while ago that was centered around, it was a domestic violence shelter. I think it was out in California or Oregon or something. There was a domestic violence shelter, and they had a board member, their board chair, I believe it was an emergency room doctor. And this doctor slash board member began to duplicate the services that were available through the domestic violence shelter. And this was not done in collaboration with or to support the work of the domestic violence shelter. They actually became competitors. It was done really to help the doctor slash board member advance their own company, their own career, right? That was a good example of being in violation of the duty of loyalty. And then lastly, the duty of obedience again reminds us that we need to pay attention to our mission, that we are relevant, that our programs and our services are still sort of under the umbrella of our mission. If we focus on mentoring kids and then suddenly start out, adopting kittens or something, right, that would be astray from our mission. We want to ensure that we are complying with the applicable federal and state and local laws, and that we are being, again, faithful stewards to this nonprofit organization. When I'm facilitating conversations with prospective board members around, how much time does it take for me to be a good board member, or what kind of capacity do I need? The answer is it depends. Each one of us on this call is involved with different organizations and have different requirements. Some of us meet on a monthly basis, some meet quarterly, some have robust committees that meet on the off months, some don't. My very strong recommendation is, if you are thinking about bringing on new board members, be very honest about what the expectations are, because you want to set that board member up for success. It's been my experience that often board members will undersell some of the expectations just because you want to really encourage someone to participate. I get it. I totally understand. What the challenge can be is someone will not know the full robust expectations, and that's not going to serve either the new board member or the organization very well in the end. Board meetings, I've noticed, still continue mostly to be virtual, at least in the organizations that we work with in our Leaders on Board program. I know that there's some that are thinking about maybe doing hybrid, some in person, some virtual. There's advantages, as we know, to both. In the boardroom, right, we ask that all board members come prepared, right, that you've read any materials that were sent in advance, that you are coming in with any questions that you might have, that you've reviewed the minutes, right, that you kind of have a sense of what's going to be going on. If there are any executive sessions, anytime where the board is having some important confidential conversations, it's important to remember to maintain that confidentiality. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Again, as board members, we need to be able to articulate the mission, the purpose, the goals of our organization. Why does it matter in the community? As a board member, being able to articulate the impact is essential. What is your elevator pitch? Have you practiced it? Does it feel comfortable? What are the most important points that you want other people to know about? Again, we've said time and time again, serving on a board is about leadership. It's about, really building your own skills in support of a nonprofit organization that you really care about. Exceptional board members are paying attention to the trends in the field, right? Paying attention to what's happening in the community around us, sharing anything that they observe, anything that they hear about the organization. I remember it was a board member who came back to the environmental group that I talked about earlier, who said, "Hey guys, like our reputation is that we're tree huggers. That's not indicative of what we do," right? So pay attention to the organization's reputation in the community. And again, think about people in your sphere, in your network, that might be good board members, people that you could bring on who have a different skill set, a different perspective, a different lived experience that could be beneficial on the board. An area that I think can be challenging for folks sometimes is if you do have a staff member in place, if there is an executive director in place, and you're a board member, right, it can feel a little bit murky. Where does my role end? Where does theirs begin? What's that gray space in between? How can I best support someone I don't work alongside every day? I think it's important to remember that we're all on the same team, right? We want this organization to succeed. And so again, what are the gifts and talents and skills that you have, and how can you leverage that to your executive director? How can you help them be their best? How can you help them be the most effective leader that they can be? Again, it's important that we evaluate that chief executive if you are part of an organization that has one. And also important to remember that while you oversee that chief executive, they oversee everybody else. So if there's a staff issue, if there's a concern, that is the executive director's job to manage. That is why you have hired that person. I've seen sometimes board members, well-intentioned, try to kind of step in and navigate some of those challenges with additional staff, when really it is the executive director who is in place to manage everybody else. So the board oversees the executive director oversees everybody else. Sounds simple, but I know that in the real world, it can be more challenging than it might sound. That is a good conversation to have as a board to ensure that you really understand what those nuanced differences are. So I went through all of that really quickly, but I did want to give about the last 15 minutes or so, open it up if anyone has any questions. Before that, though, I do just want to underscore that we have a number of resources listed on this PowerPoint that will be shared with you. BoardSource is certainly there. As I mentioned earlier, they have great templates, tutorials, webinars that you have access to. Of course, the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving's nonprofit support program, which you've heard a little bit about earlier. They are a tremendous resource, particularly for our small nonprofit partners. We are here, Leaders on Board is here, Leadership Greater Hartford is here. If you feel like you could benefit from some board training for your own boards, that is an option. If you're looking for new board members, know that we are here to support you as well. And then lastly, I just want to underscore pro bono partnership. If you find yourself in a position where you have some legal questions, you have some concerns, pro bono partnership is a resource in our community that is available to support you. When the organization that I was a part of, where we lost 65% of our funding and didn't know what to do, our nonprofit merged with another nonprofit. And I got to tell you, that is a big, messy legal business that not one of us knew what to do with, but pro bono partnership did. They worked with us every step of the way, and they were just wonderful. So all of this will be shared with you following today's presentation. But for now, I just want to offer first my thanks to the team that helped put this on, but also to all of you for carving out your time, and officially open it up for any questions that you might have. Before I do that, though, Daniel or Lucas, anything you want to say? For sure.
I'm good.
Okay. Monica from the Hartford Foundation just put a survey link into the chat. Please feel free to fill that out. It's really helpful for us to know, what we can do to improve, what you liked, what's helpful, what's not helpful. And please offer any questions or insights that you might have. I'm going to take down my slides just so I can see folks. Hello, everybody.
And as a reminder, I just want to share that we will be sharing the recordings slide deck so that you can have access to all the links that May shared.
Thanks, Lucas. Is anything bubbling up for folks? Any concerns that you want to share amongst this group of colleagues? Will the survey go out via email as well?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, well, it doesn't look like there's any burning questions at the moment. If anything does come up, please feel free to reach out to me or to Daniel or Lucas. Really appreciate you all being here today. Thank you for your time, for your energy, for the good work you're doing in all of our nonprofits, and look forward to hopefully seeing you again soon. Take good care.
It's someone just
Oh.
wrote on the chat, May.
That
Nick
was
is
me.
asking for your contact
sorry.
information, but Deanne also has a question.
Yes, I did.
Excellent. Hey,
Can you hear me?
yes.
Okay, I just wanted to know if you could kind of give some examples of the types of services that you guys provide to the nonprofits in the area.
Yeah, absolutely. So Leadership Greater Hartford has a number of programs that are available both to nonprofits and corporations in our community. So we have leadership development experiences that bring together cross-sector participants for some pretty intensive leadership development experiences, all rooted in community work. Leaders on Board is the program that is most geared towards nonprofits in that we help existing boards through, board retreats or webinars, conversations to help existing board members feel all the more empowered and effective. A lot of board members we hear are folks that have been tapped on the shoulder to serve because they have a connection, they're great individuals, they're passionate, but not necessarily knowing what it is that they should be doing on the board. So we come in and do some education and conversation around board member practices, best practices. We obviously help new boards get new members. So I can send some information over to you about sort of the full
Great.
roster.
Thank you very much.
Steve, I see your question. So there was a question around, is there other resources beyond the Third Sector New England 2017 survey for compensation analysis? I don't know that answer. I don't know if anyone at the foundation has any insight into that.
Not at the moment that I can think of, although I do think that TSNE has since 2017, updated their compensation study. And so I think a quick Google search, you might be able to find more updated materials.
I'm going to look at that too, so I can update my slides. But thank you, that's a good question. Anybody else?
I don't think so, May.
Okay, well, friends, thank you so much. It was great spending some time with you.
Thank you so much for the session, May. And I ask everybody, please complete the evaluation form before you exit the room. Follow-up email will include a copy of the PowerPoint presentation, a link to the recording, a link to upcoming workshops, and also a link to the survey. Thank you so much. We'll see you next month.